Hey, welcome back to History Rescue. On tonight's episode, we're going to do the reassembly of our Marlin or Glenfield Model 60. The first thing we'll do, we'll start off with putting the trigger guard back on. So we'll take our trigger guard, it'll just sit right down in there. Now, this is the old style, so it has the 2 screws on the trigger guard in the back. The new style does not have that second screw as part of the trigger guard. So we'll take our wood screw that came out of there, and then this one will be our front screw. This wood screw will go in the rearward screw hole. Screw that back in, and then if you'll come to the inside, your hole right here, this little washer will just sit right down inside that hole, and you can just hold it with your finger, put your screw in, and tighten it down. Doesn't have to be super tight, just good and snug. Alright, that's your trigger guard installed. The other bolt hole, which will be for your long screw, that'll go into the receiver when we put the barrel and everything in. Alright, next we'll start assembling the magazine tube and the sight. You'll take and slide your magazine tube into your front sight base. Sometimes it's a little snug to get in there, and you'll have a little groove cut on your magazine tube. It'll have to line up with your pinhole on your sight. Sometimes that takes just a second to get lined up just right. And then your pin will drive in from the left side of your sight base, with the non-knurled side going in first. Should be a fairly easy pin to insert. If you got any resistance, something's not lined up right. Then you'll take your barrel and receiver and slide your front sight onto your barrel while making sure your magazine tube lines up in the receiver down here. Sometimes you gotta work at it just a minute to get it on there just right. And most of these older guns, they've got a few years on them, so there'll be a little wear mark right around the front sight. You can usually tell exactly where where you need to stop. If there is nothing, if there is no wear mark there for you to know when to stop, whenever your magazine tube seats to the rearward position in the receiver will be where you need to stop at. Then you'll take your little set screw that we took out of our front sight, and we'll secure that. You can put a little bit of a semi-permanent thread locker on there if you want, but it's not really necessary. I don't think I've ever known one to come out. And doesn't have to be super tight, just snug it down. And that's good and installed. Check your magazine tube for fit. Alright. Then remove that. We'll reinstall that later. Let's get the bolt and everything put together. We'll take our bolt and we'll slide our firing pin in. Your firing pin is going to go in this orientation. It'll slide right up to the rear. And you'll get your little roller. Your roller is going to go in this groove right here. Right there. Now on your bolt pins, you're going to get the larger of the three, and it's going to go in from the non-ejection port side of the bolt, with the non-knurled side going in first. You can slide that right through. Make sure it goes through the notch on the firing pin, and then you also have to make sure it goes through your roller, so you may have to get a little pick and pick that roller up just a little bit to make sure it goes through there. Then you can take and seat it. There shouldn't be much resistance there. Make sure your roller will freely spin, and make sure your firing pin will move freely as well. Alright. Then we'll go with our non-ejection port side extractor. That will be this extractor right here with the curved nose. You get your spring for that. Your spring will sit right down in the little cup, and your extractor will sit down in there. Now you can take a pick or a pin or anything you want and just hold that extractor in place. Out of your two pins that you got left, the longer one is going to go for this extractor, and it's going to go in the bottom of the bolt right here first, with the non-knurled side going in first. Let's get that started. And if you've got something in there to hold that already, You can just sort of let that hang to the side and tap this in, and as you tap it in, it'll push that out. Then you can take and seat that pin. Check for movement on your extractor. Then we can go to our other side. This will be your ejection port side extractor. Remember the one with the hump on it for the pin to go through. You get your spring. Set your spring down in there. Then your extractor will go in on top of that. And there again, we'll take a little pick. And we'll stick in through the bottom and hold that into place. And your little bitty short pin will be the one that holds this in. And it's going to go in from the top side in the charging handle groove right here. And the non-knurled side will go in first. Just like the other stuff, just hold that little, let that little pick just right in there, and as you push the pin in, it'll push that pick out. And we'll seat that one. Check for spring tension and movement on that one. And that is your bolt assembled. And we can go ahead and install our bolt. Well, let's go ahead and put the rear side on first, just so we ain't banging it around. Take your rear sight. It'll drift on from the non-ejection port side. They have fancy sight pushers you can use for this, or you can easily just take a non-marring hammer and just tap it on. So we'll use the nylon side, which is the non-marring side, and just tap it on until you have it lined up. You put your rear sight elevator in. The ramped side will go in first. I'll just pull that up and slide it in until it locks into one of the notches, and then that'll be installed. Alright, on your bolt, you'll take your charging handle, and you can just go ahead and set that in the ejection port, just like so. Take your bolt, and it'll go in, and your charging handle is going to end up going in this groove right here. It'll just go in there. You can get those installed. Then you'll come and get your recoil spring and your recoil spring guide rod. You'll want to put a little bit of oil on these and give a little shot down in there for the bolt to ride on, and pick this up just a little bit and slide this in. Now there's multiple ways you can do this. Some guys try to force this pin in like this, but then you're fighting against the spring. Some people will take the bolt out and they'll install the guide rod first and sort of help the spring back until it gets captured inside the bolt, and then just push it back down and it'll fall into place. Make sure your charging handle stays under the bolt. That's generally the easiest way to do it. And then you'll be right back in place right there. Alright, let's get this fire control group put together. These are fairly simple if you know how to do it. Fairly nerve-wracking if you don't. They tend to cause a lot of issue with these old Model 60s. People don't take them apart and clean them because they cause you issue. So they get gummed up, they get nasty, they cause feeding and reliability issues. Generally, you don't need to take it apart. You can just spray it out with some brake-free, whatever cleaner that you use. Brush it out with a brush and be done with it. But from time to time they do get nasty, and from time to time you do need to take it apart and clean it. Or if you have a worn or broken part or issue you need to deal with, sometimes you do need to take them apart. These little recoil buffers here, sometimes they will go bad and you'll need to replace those. So there is times when these need to be taken apart, so we're addressing that today. The first thing you need to do is take your hammer and slide your hammer spring over your strut. You'll take your retainer here, and there's a notched side. This notched side is gonna, when you're holding it like this, the notched side will go to your right hand. And you'll line that strut over the hole in that. Sometimes it's a little easier said than done. You'll line those up. Push the strut through there. And stick a pick through the hole on the hammer strut. So you'll take and capture that hammer spring on that strut right there. And this will save you a lot of aggravation here in just a little bit. Alright, next you can take this one with the big pin on it. That'll be your left side or non-ejection port side of your fire control group. The one without the big pin will be your ejection port side, and they will be in this orientation right here. So you can take your recoil buffer and just drop it over that pin. Take your sear, and this is your sear spring. This small hooked end of the spring will hook into the sear, and you can just rotate that down into place, and that will sit right here. You can take this sear pin and it will just go right through. It'll set through the sear and it'll go in this hole right here. And then you will take your larger of your C-clips. You'll come over here, flip it over, and that large C-clip is going to hold that pin in place. You can use a flat blade screwdriver, pocket knife, a punch, whatever, and just pop that little C-clip on. Once you have your sear installed with the C-clip, you can take your sear spring. The short side will go into the sear. It's going to go in this hole. It'll set in, rotate into place. And then this little hole right here, it's going to take the other end of the spring. You can rotate the sear up out of the way for a moment. Grab that spring, pull it back just a little bit, and get it into that hole. And then you should have spring tension on the sear. Alright, next you'll take your pin, your hammer pin. There'll be a bulged out side that's going to go down into the left side plate. And you'll want to make sure this goes in between these two forks on the sear. And flip that over. Get one of your small C-clips. And come over here and get that installed. And just make sure that pops into place. And that recoil buffer falls off it half the time. Now you can take your hammer and it will sit down over that hammer pin. Just like so. And this hole right up underneath the sear is where the leg of this retainer plate is going to sit, just like that. I've been calling the disconnector the sear the whole time. I just realized it when I went to put the sear in. I've got to redo that.
Just say, I've been saying the sear the whole time, but it's actually the disconnector. I know it's typically I've never messed up.
Huh?
Because I never mess up.
Well, everybody messes up. Alright, next we'll take our sear and our sear spring. This small portion of the spring will go into the sear like so, and leaving the longer portion hanging off. And you can take and install these on this pin on the right side plate. Go They'll need to go on just like that. Right. You can take this pin and put it on the big stud, and it'll set on just like this with the short arm facing forward and the curved arm facing rear for the moment. You can take your cartridge block and your cartridge elevator, take the notched side, it's going to go down, it'll just slide right through there just like this, and these two pins will line up in these two holes on your block or on your plate, and then this hole will line up on your hammer pin. Alright, make sure this retainer plate stays locked in its hole. Now this is kind of a tricky part. You have to hold your sear on and get it up underneath this elevator without falling off of your. Sometimes it's easier if you'll take it and slide it in like this. And then go to slide this pin will go through the sear. And get it just like that. And then we'll pull this. You gotta do it carefully. Put it on just enough. To where you can slide that sear pin in. You almost got to have 3 hands to do it. Line it up with that hole. Line all your holes up. Check everything, make sure it's good. Get your other C-clip, and it's going to go on this stud right here. Get that and push it on. Then you'll flip it over. You'll have 2 more pins you need to put a C-clip on. There's a C-clip on both sides of this pin on the sear. Sometimes it'll fall right out of this left side plate, and when it does, you can just install all that easy on this left side and then just set the whole right side down on top of it. Sometimes it's stuck in this plate and don't want to come out like this one is, and that's why we had to put it in a little odd like that. But once you got all those installed, you can take your sear pin, pull it down and make sure it's locked up inside there, and then this, look, there's a little hole right here, this one right here. This pin needs to go in that hole. It's easy enough. Usually you can just do it with your thumb and push it up there till it gets to it. Sometimes if you can't, or if your thumb's too big, just grab you a little pair of pliers and push it right into that hole. Now, on your cartridge elevator spring, you got this short side. On the old style cartridge block, there's a little groove on the side of the cartridge block, and that's going to go down and lock inside that groove right in here. This is a new style assembly. On the new style one, it'll have the groove on top right here, and then your cartridge elevator is a little different because it has a bolt hold open on it. And then there's your bolt hold open lever that's not on the old style one. Your hammer's a little bit different. Your disconnector's a little bit different. Your sear spring is different. It doesn't lock into that hole. It will take and bend up onto the back side of the cartridge elevator spring pin. So they're essentially the same, but they have a few minute differences to them, just in the way they look, not necessarily how they function. And then you'll have the remember on our old style one we have screws on the front side right here, whereas the new style one is notched to go up underneath the retaining pins. But there's an easy visual difference on the new and old style. We'll do another video on a new style Model 60 and disassemble this one and show you that one in depth on another video. But then we take our other end of our elevator spring, and it's essentially going to get pushed down, straight down, until it gets up underneath the elevator, and then it will be in its position. Sometimes you can use a pair of pliers to do it. Sometimes you don't really have enough room. Sometimes it's easier to do it with a flat blade screwdriver or a punch, which is how I generally prefer to do it on these. Sometimes you can get a flat blade screwdriver and get it right inside that little groove and just push it straight down. till it goes underneath the elevator, and then will be under its spring tension for the elevator to work. You want to make sure that pin, that spring, is pushed all the way back. On that pin, and then check it over real good, make sure everything's where it's supposed to be and all your C-clips are in. And then you can just take your pick and pull it, wiggle it straight out of the hammer strut. Sometimes if you'll cock the hammer, make it easier to get out. It'll come out either way, but sometimes it's easier when it's cocked. Depends on the size of the pick you got. You can also use a paper clip for that. Paper clips work easy. Give it a quick function check. We'll push forward on the disconnector here. Make sure it's working. Push down on the disconnector. Make sure it's not working. And that's a fully assembled fire control group for our rifle. And we'll install it real quick. It's just going to, you can go ahead and cock the hammer and it'll just set straight down on top. Put your front screws in. Put your other front screw in. Alright, then we'll take our rear screw. The big side of the screw will go in from the non-ejection port side. We'll go straight in, and then our screw will go in this way, and those will just screw straight into each other. Snug that down. Snug down your front ones. We'll put our rifle back in our stock. Snug our main takedown screw. Snug that down. We got our other rear screw. It'll go in the other screw hole left over on the back of the trigger guard. And just screw that back in. Snag it down. And install our magazine. Do a quick function check. Alright, there we go. That's our fully disassembled, cleaned up, and reassembled old style Marlin Glenfield Model 60. Alright, there's our completely reassembled Marlin Glenfield Model 60, an old style one. Hope you've enjoyed tonight's video. Our goal here at History Rescue is to give you enough information to try to keep these old guns shooting. Keep them clean and maintained, that way they're reliable for you. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe. That way we can get some more of them out to you. Thank you very much.